Hi, I'm Nick Palmisciano, and this is the Bad News Network. Due to Hurricane Michael, we're currently running the lights in here off of my Jeep. Kanye West. His rant was insane and awesome. It was insanely awesome. I mean, the dude started talking about the multiverse. He straight up started talking about an alternate dimension where he was Larry Hoover and Larry Hoover was him, and that he would want Larry Hoover to help him if he was in a similar situation. Then he started talking about welfare being an anchor for the black community, and even showed statistics that tied the increase in welfare to an increase in jail time for black people. And then he jumped to, when I put on my MAGA hat, I feel like Superman. Smash cut from that to the importance of bringing jobs to the country and the importance of Americans improving car design so that they're sexy as f***. Then smash cut to the importance of early education and an increased view of mental health. I mean, it was all over the place. But most of all, what he kept hitting on is the fact that nobody should be able to tell him what he is supposed to think. Now, there were tons of hot takes about this. Liberals are saying that, he's a crazy person, Trump is taking advantage of him, and, he's doing a disservice to the black community. Conservative outlets are clinging to the concept of breaking from the plantation, an allusion to slavery and the fact that the Democratic Party has controlled the African American vote for a very long time. The rapper T.I. took major issue with Mr. West, stating that if he was there, he would have slapped him right in the face. He stated that Mr. West was selling out and that this performance was indicative of having low moral character. Maybe take it easy with the whole low moral character part, Mr. I. After all, aren't you the guy that spent almost 5 years in prison for assaulting a female deputy, drug running, weapons running, attempting to buy weapons from a federal agent? I mean, come on now. Maybe be a little more self-aware. And one more thing, T.I., or should I say Clifford Harris Jr., you're basically the bad guy from 8 Mile. I mean, everybody and their mother seems to have a strong opinion about what Kanye West accomplished or didn't accomplish by sitting down with the president. But I have to say that the craziest take came from Donna Brazile. Miss Brazile said, and I quote, "Kanye set us back 155 years. Wait, what? She is comparing a wealthy black American known by virtually everybody in the country getting a private sit-down meeting with the most powerful man on the planet while everybody in the press hangs on his every word to slavery? Slavery, where human beings were bought and sold and had the same rights as essentially cattle, where non-compliant men were beaten, where non-compliant women were beaten and raped, where families were broken apart, and where the murder of a black person resulted in merely a fine. Now, I know it's one of those things that people just say, like a throwaway comment to show how dramatic everything is. But shouldn't we start calling people on that kind of bullshit? She is saying that Kanye West's act of sitting down with the president erases Harriet Tubman, Dred Scott, Robert Smalls, of Frederick Douglass, of Susie King Taylor, or maybe the journey of Henry O. Flipper, the first black man that was accepted to my alma mater of West Point, where he was treated as a second-class citizen the entire time and didn't enjoy any of the benefits and bonds of going to that institution because he was completely ostracized. Of so many more people that struggled and accomplished and fought. People tend to think about things as continuous progress, that things have gotten continuously better for black people since the abolition of slavery. But the truth of the matter is that there were more people elected to Congress in the black community directly after the abolition of slavery than there were some 35 years later. The 50th Congress had no black people. In fact, it took another 28 years before anybody from the African American community was elected to Congress. That was due to Jim Crow laws that allowed for intimidation at the polls, with the express goal of keeping black people from voting. So good people sued to get rid of those laws, and in 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson, the United States Supreme Court spat on black people once again and said that Jim Crow laws did not in fact violate the 13th or 14th Amendments. Once again telling black people that they did not belong in our society. So from 1901 to 1929, there were absolutely no black people in the House of Representatives, but yet there were 370,000 black people that served during World War I. In 1932, a time when most of our grandparents were alive, the United States government purposefully gave black men syphilis to study the effects of the disease. It took until 1942 for the Marine Corps to begrudgingly allow black people to serve in the Marines, albeit in a segregated capacity. It took until 1947, right about the time that most of our parents were born, to allow the first black man to play baseball. It wasn't until 1954 in the Supreme Court, Brown versus the Board of Education, that we finally decided that it was okay for black kids to go to school with white kids. And that decision was so disliked that President Eisenhower had to send the National Guard to Little Rock, Arkansas for an entire year to keep 9 black students safe. And it was only 1964, the Civil Rights Act, that finally said black people are equal to white people and segregation is gone. That's only 13 years before I was born. We're not talking about some faraway place. Over the 5 years before and after this event, multiple black leaders, including Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, were assassinated because of their drive towards equality. Finally, over the next decade, black people were allowed to serve in government capacities ranging from mayor to governor. The year that I was born in 1977 was the first time that a black person served as the ambassador to the United Nations. During my childhood in the 80s was the first time that we saw black people finally start rising to prominence in places like entertainment and government. You had Bryant Gumbel on The Today Show, Bill Cosby, The Cosby Show. You had Michael Jackson. You had Oprah Winfrey. Colin Powell became the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In 1997, the year before I graduated West Point, the United States finally apologized to those men they gave syphilis to in 1932. In 2001, Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice became, respectively, the first Secretary of State and head of the NSA from the African American community. In 2004, when Barack Obama was elected to the Senate, he became only the 5th black senator in history. And finally, in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president, he became the first and only black president in United States history. But all that 155 years of brutal history gets erased by Ye showing up and hanging out with the president for a couple hours in front of the press. Come on now, Donna. 54 years ago, that man would not even have been able to drink from the same water fountain as the president, and now he's sitting across from him telling him what he thinks the world should look like, and the president is listening and the press is covering it. In other celebrity news, Taylor Swift came out in support of the Democratic Party this week. This shocked some people and others called for a boycott, but really, why? Did we not think Taylor Swift was a Democrat? I mean, did we expect her to just suddenly show up and start stumping for Orrin Hatch? In crazy people news, Antifa mobs in Portland are diverting traffic and the police have been told not to get involved. What could possibly go wrong? Hillary Clinton came back into the limelight this week and once again it did nothing good for anyone. Her big quote was, "Civility can't start until the Democrats win the House or the Senate or both." Someone she trusts needs to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with her. Even for the people that voted for her, liking her more than Trump is not the same thing as liking her. It's like having to make a decision between, do you want herpes or gonorrhea? Just because you may have preferred gonorrhea, it doesn't mean you want it hanging out all the time. Porn star Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenetti, has challenged Donald Trump Jr. to an MMA fight. At first I thought this was just a case of a guy that had taken like 3 jiu-jitsu classes at the Y thinking he was the next Anderson Silva, but apparently I challenge Donald Trump Jr. to an MMA fight is actually Latin for, "Oh God, give me the attention I so desperately crave." A woman with an emotional support squirrel was kicked off of a Frontier Airlines flight this week. It's because she has a squirrel, for f***'s sake. The angry woman was quoted as saying, "I was treated very poorly. I was called a liar by one of the stewardesses. I'm going for blood. I'm going all the way. I'm contacting an attorney." A rep for the Squirrels stated, "This whole situation is getting a little nuts. I'm sorry. That was a corny joke." Detroit, a city with 20 million in unfunded liabilities, 80,000 abandoned buildings, 58-minute police response times, only 7% of 8th graders being proficient in reading, and just a massive amount of constant violence and murder on a daily basis, has finally come up with a solution I think is going to work for everyone. The answer? No spank zones. You heard that right, folks. The city is going to commit money and resources to putting up signs letting people know in various public locations that spanking in these areas is not encouraged. Great call, Detroit. I think you figured out the root cause of this problem. And finally, this past week, Justice Kavanagh was seated on the Supreme Court, ending his fierce public battle with Dr. Christine Ford. We reached out to the Democratic Party to see if they had any further comments about Dr. Ford, to which they replied, "Who?" And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano, and this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and I've got to tell you, it was not easy to make the news today running off of a Jeep Wrangler.